So your story's finally ready. It is a moment to celebrate because it has been such hard work up to this point. So congratulations on finishing. You can take a few days off to relish the feeling of having finished the story, but I don't want you to stop there. Your story is too important for it to be tucked away in some file or notebook. You want to have that story up here, ready at a moment's notice. You never know when the opportunity to give your testimony, to tell your story, will present itself. So you want to be prepared. Imagine you get the opportunity to share your story. You take out your notebook or your phone and you start reading. That would be a little bit awkward and it wouldn't seem genuine. It may not even seem like it's your story at all. And it definitely won't be engaging because it is hard to be present and engaging when you're reading off a script. But I have good news. You lived your story, so you know it better than anyone. And after incorporating the tools in this course, you know it better now than you knew it before you even started. You probably already have most of it in your mind and could give a pretty good summary of it if asked. So committing it to memory will be no problem for you. The question is, to memorize or not to memorize? There's debate about whether a story should be memorized or not. Some prefer familiarization over memorization. This means you familiarize yourself with the general course of the story. You don't memorize every word. Instead, you memorize the bullet points of the story. It is a lot easier to memorize several points than it is to memorize hundreds or thousands of words. And you are less likely to lose your place, as can happen when you've memorized something word for word. When you rely on memorization, you can run into some problems. The first is that usually when you memorize something, you're relying on a trigger word that triggers the next word. This is how I memorize my spoken word poetry. One word helps me tie into the next word or phrase, but poetry is a lot different in that a poem is a lot shorter than a story, and it has a certain flow and rhythm, sometimes with rhyming words. The words are specifically chosen and serve a specific purpose, so getting the words right is critical. Therefore, memorization is required there. However, with a story, it's not about the exact words, it's about conveying a meaning. You can use different words to say the same thing, and it won't change the meaning of the story. This familiarization lets you sound natural and conversational, something that is hard to do when you're relying on a mental script as you speak. That's why spoken word poetry is considered performance poetry. It is memorized. It's not meant to sound natural. But storytelling should sound natural. You want to be present when telling your story, but that's hard to do when you're worried you might forget a word. Familiarization is safer. Memorization only provides the illusion of safety. It gives us false assurance. But some of us, like me, are a little hard-headed in that. I lean toward memorization. I'm getting better now, but I like having at least the illusion of safety. I am finding a compromise though with semi-memorization. If you're like me and you want to go that route, this is how that works. Write down the story word for word. You probably already have this as you've been developing it. Write down the story word for word. Read it through several times, then start memorizing it in chunks, beginning with, the beginning. Once you've got one piece down, move on to the next. This usually takes a few days. Continue this process until you've memorized the story word for word. Next, write down the main points of the story. They'll usually be between 5 and 10, depending on the length of the story. Also, write down those lines that you love and want to deliver word for word. Use these points and tell yourself the story while you're showering or driving, cooking, or in bed for the night. You will have told yourself the story multiple times over that it will become extremely familiar, and you'll get increasingly comfortable telling it without relying on trigger words or phrases. This is when you free yourself up from the need to tell it word for word. You will be so comfortable with the story after having repeated it to yourself so many times that you will be able to substitute words, include a detail you hadn't thought of, and to just generally feel more confident and comfortable with the story. However, if you don't want to go through that torture, just familiarize yourself with the story by making the list of points. Practice the story with them until you are comfortable enough to discard your notes. So go ahead. You can do this.